In 2023, there were 49,316 suicide deaths in the United States. According to the CDC, men outnumbered women 4 to 1. Of those nearly 50,000 deaths, African American and minority men between the ages of 10 and 34 made up 18.3%. That means that in homes, schools, neighborhoods, workplaces, and communities across the country, countless young men, brilliant, gifted, complicated men, lost battles that most of us didn't even know they were fighting. I know I'd like to see that number plummet and never rise again. I'm Jem. I'm a wellness coach specializing in guiding trauma survivors through the process of emotional healing. And I have something I need to talk to you about. Something urgent, something heavy, something we can no longer afford to whisper about in the shadows. 49,316 lives lost. That is not just a number. That is so much hopelessness, so much tragedy, so much silence, and so much pain. And that number is why I'm here today. I'm here to bring awareness to an issue that has quietly destroyed families for generations. I'm here to tell you that we can do something about it. We can tear down the stigma, disrupt the silence, and rewrite the narrative of mental health in minority communities. But we cannot do that unless we talk about it. Not once, not timidly, not abstractly. We have to talk about it until people begin to listen. Let me pause here for a moment. Think about that number again. 49,316. Each one represents a story cut short, a family forever altered, a community left with a void. These are not distant abstractions. These are neighbors, friends, sons, brothers, people we pass every day without knowing the weight that they carry. Statistics are cold. They're sterile. They don't show you the trembling hands, the sleepless nights, the bottled up emotions, or the quiet breakdowns behind closed doors. What these statistics are really saying is that men in minority communities are dying from silence at a rate exponentially higher than women. And they're dying young. Picture this. Young men in their prime, full of potential, silenced before they could bloom. Suicide is the third leading cause of death for those aged 15 to 34 in these communities, with rates for African American males over 4 times higher than females, climbing from 5.5 per 100,000 to 7.7 in 2020. This is fueled by layers of childhood adversity, systemic racism, economic pressures, and profound isolation that breeds deep mistrust and despair. Women, we absolutely have our battles, but society does grant us permission. We're allowed to cry. We can break down. We can call a friend and say, I'm not okay. That permission feels like a lifeline sometimes. It's a small crack in the armor where light can get in. Men, especially minority men, are not given that same space. They're told to be strong, be tough, hold it together, man up. These words echo from playgrounds to boardrooms, from childhood games to adult responsibilities, shaping identities before boys even understand the cost. This conditioning begins early, far earlier than most of us realize. It's in the way a father tells his son to shake off a scraped knee, or how a coach benches tears. It is woven into culture, into families, into expectations, and it is especially prevalent in communities of color, where 1 in 3 rural African American men report recent suicidal ideation, often tied to grinding economic hardship, unrelenting trauma, and discrimination that erodes even the closest relationships, leaving trust as collateral damage. How do I know? Because I've seen it up close. Let me take you back to where this all started for me. Back in 2019, I created an indie hip hop blog called Never Near. It was a passion project, but it quickly grew legs. And over 5 years, I interviewed about 400 incredibly talented indie rappers. Only 3 of them were women. We are sorely underrepresented in that world. But the rest were young men, mostly African American, Puerto Rican, Haitian, men of color navigating a world that demanded they be unbreakable. These weren't distant interviews. Some of these men became my friends. Even now, after the blog, after life pulled us in different directions, I still talk to many of them, catching up on their beats and their breakthroughs. And from those friendships, I learned something that changed my life forever. Men of color are not only dealing with racism, discrimination, and systemic injustice, they're carrying the weight of a generational mental health stigma that tells them their feelings are dangerous and unmanly. They are taught from birth that no help is coming, that vulnerability is a liability, a crack in your armor that the world will exploit, that the world is already hard enough, so they must become harder, forging themselves into steel to withstand the blows. This isn't just pressure, it's a legacy of silence, shame, and emotional suffocation passed from fathers to sons, not because they didn't love them, but because they didn't know any other way to survive. Fathers who themselves were taught the same harsh lessons, repeating the cycle in desperation. This pattern echoes through history, amplifying modern barriers like dramatically lower mental health treatment rates. African Americans receive medication therapy at 52% the rate of the general population, often due to mistrust in systems that have failed them. Imagine waking up every day under that kind of weight. The alarm buzzes, and before your feet hit the floor, the expectations settle on you like a heavy coat. Imagine being sad, lonely, overwhelmed, and desperate for comfort, but unable to ask for it because your community taught you that suffering is simply part of your identity. Imagine surviving every day instead of living it. Your mind starved for connection, deteriorating in isolation, as low-resource upbringings, racial mistrust, and daily microaggressions compound the toll, turning inward pain outward in ways that statistics barely capture. I can only imagine what that feels like because I've never had to shoulder that kind of cultural burden, but I have listened to the stories of men who have. After hours on calls, texts at 2 a.m., shared silences that spoke volumes. And it has changed me profoundly. It shaped and fueled Wistful Wounds Awakening's gentle, trauma-informed approach to shadow work for true emotional healing. Let me share 3 of those stories with you now. These aren't polished anecdotes, they're raw glimpses into lives shaped by silence. Pause with me as I tell them and feel their weight. One of my friends, a proud father of 5, married his high school sweetheart. They were together for 20 years. They built a life, a home, a family, and shared dreams. Then, in 2023, his wife died suddenly. Just gone. One moment there, the next, an empty space at the table. And this man, this loving husband, this devoted father, was left alone to raise 5 children and carry his own grief on his back, a burden that statistics show minority men bear in silence, with firearm-related suicides predominant against African American males as the ultimate tragic release. When he told me, my instinct was to console him. I wanted to be there for him, to hug him, just sit with him and let him fall apart. But he didn't cry. He didn't talk. He didn't share or vent or ask me for comfort. He just said he was fine. He always said that he was fine because that's what he was taught to say. From boyhood onward, fine was the only acceptable answer. So I didn't push him. I simply checked in gently from time to time with texts like, "How's the day treating you?" But to this day, he's never opened up about that loss. This is the cost of silence. A man broken in half, still trying to hold the whole world together. His pain festering unseen as societal expectations demand resilience over release day after grueling day. Another friend, one of the best lyricists I've ever met, had a rough exterior but a soft heart. We used to record together in Fort Myers, late nights cramped in motel rooms, and he had that rare gift where he poured raw emotion into every bar and they hit like punches. Then one day, the mother of his 3-year-old son took him and moved to another state, ripping away his daily joy. There is nothing sadder than a man that loves his child, wants to be there for them, and can't because somebody took them away. I watched him unravel slowly. He was there physically, but mentally he was gone. His eyes were just distant. And he insisted he was good. He insisted he would handle it. And he insisted he didn't need to talk about it. And the silence swallowed him whole. Soon, he stopped making music. The beats that once flowed endlessly were now silent. He stopped showing up. He stopped showing up to life. And he stopped taking care of himself. Eventually, I found out he was living in his car. He had blown up at work because emotion always finds a way out, bursting like steam from a sealed pot. And he lost his job. This mirrors heartbreaking patterns where suppressed feelings erupt destructively, contributing to the 4-fold higher suicide rate among African American males compared to females. This is what pressure does. This is what silence does, turning creative souls into shadows of themselves, extinguishing light where we need it in the world. And then there's my friend Alfred Banks, whose brother died by suicide, a loss that could have ended him too. Alfred could have shut down. He could have buried that grief so deep it poisoned him from the inside, joining the countless others lost to the same void. But instead, he did something extraordinary. He took his pain and turned it into power. He used his music, his platform, to talk openly about suicide, depression, and mental health, laying bare the battles in lyrics that resonated beyond the mic. He created art out of tragedy. He created conversation out of silence, and people listened. They listened because truth has a frequency that you can feel in your bones. Alfred reclaimed his voice, and when he did, he helped thousands of others find theirs, proving that breaking silence can ripple outward, countering the 29.4% rise in suicide rates among African Americans aged 10 to 24 from 2018 to 2023. And we can do that too. We can take back the power the stigma has stolen from generations silenced from potential unrealized. We can stop pretending mental health is a private problem, hidden away like a secret. We can stop treating suffering like a personal failure, a character flaw. We can make vulnerability normal, not a weakness, but a strength that builds unbreakable bonds. We can make healing accessible. No gatekeepers, no judgment, just open doors. We can make caring about one another the cultural standard, where how are you means tell me the truth. And it starts in rooms like this, with conversations like this, expanding into daily check-ins that interrupt isolation, one honest moment at a time. I want to shift the lens now, because the stigma impacts minority women deeply too, just in different ways, often subtler, but no less devastating. In many households, women of color are expected to be as tough as men, holding it all up while the world crumbles around them. Emotionally bulletproof, no cracks allowed. Backbone of the family, bending but never breaking. Caretaker for everyone else's wounds but their own. Providing, scraping by to keep the lights on. Emotional laborer, absorbing the pain of loved ones like a sponge. And because of that expectation, their suffering often goes unnoticed, with 39% of African American high schoolers reporting persistent sadness, yet far lower treatment access, perpetuating this cycle. My sister is proof of that. I come from a multiracial family. My mother's white and my father is Puerto Rican, and my sister is African American. She was the toughest woman I knew growing up. She protected me fiercely. But toughness is not immunity. It's a costume that wears thin. About 20 years ago, she fell deeply in love with a younger man. They had 2 beautiful children, milestones marking their joy. But about a decade later, he began spiraling, paranoia creeping in, anxiety mounting, binge drinking numbing the edges, emotional isolation building walls. His world shrank to 4 walls and a bottle. The loneliness must have been unbearable, but he suffered in silence until his body collapsed from a brain embolism. He fell into a coma and died after life support was removed. Gone, leaving her with echoes. My sister never cried, not in front of us, not even at home when she was alone with the kids' questions. She went back to work like nothing happened. Mornings mechanical, smiles forced. She put on a mask so convincing that even grief couldn't crack it. This resilience masked deep pain, perpetuating cycles where women of color endure unseen, much like the lower suicide attempt reporting, but still a profound emotional toll that lingers for years. This is how stigma shapes women of color. They become the mask. They embody the mask. They convince the world and themselves that they are fine, burying hurt until it hardens into armor. But no one is fine after losing their partner. I told you these stories because behind every statistic is a human being with dreams, fears, talents, relationships, lives rich with possibility, cut short by unspoken pain. Because every suicide is a tragedy of silence, a final whisper no one heard. Behind every silence is a voice that never felt safe to be expressed. So, what can we do? You're not just one person. You're a thread in a community. You might be sitting there thinking, yeah, this is terrible, but I'm one person. What can I really do? That doubt's natural. It's overwhelm speaking. But today, you're not one person. You're one person among many. In this room, in your circles, woven into a tapestry, stronger together. And we all came here with a shared purpose: to break the stigma, to shatter the silence, to make the invisible visible, one story at a time. Stigma thrives in darkness, shadows where shame festers unchecked. Awareness destroys darkness, flooding it with light. The first and most powerful thing we can do about it is talk about it. Name it plainly without apology. Don't hide it under platitudes or distractions, not sugarcoat it to spare feelings, not avoid it because it's uncomfortable. Talk about it in your friend group, over coffee, during hangouts. Talk about it at family gatherings, Christmas, barbecues. Talk about it in the barbershop, in the car, on FaceTime, wherever you gather. Creating safe spaces that counter historical mistrust built over generations. Will people push back? Probably. Will they be uncomfortable? Most definitely. But you need to talk about it anyway. Because silence kills slowly, invisibly. Conversation heals, mending what was torn. Mental health stigma didn't just appear out of nowhere. It is woven into history, threads pulled tight over centuries. During slavery, it was widely believed that African American people were incapable of experiencing depression or anxiety. This myth served a purpose. It justified their oppression, claiming no property worries meant no mental distress, dehumanizing suffering to ease consciences. Fast forward through segregation's iron grip, redlining's economic strangulation, medical discrimination's betrayal, economic barriers, crush, incarceration cycles, police brutality. This trauma accumulated like storm clouds. And the message passed down through generations became, we don't show weakness, we survive. Survival as identity. But surviving is not the same thing as living. It's a half-life where emotions fester into shame, driving higher rates among young African American men, trapping potential in pain. When we stifle our emotions, they don't go away. They burrow deeper roots, spreading unseen. They become shame. They become depression. They become isolation. They become self-hatred. And sometimes they become suicide, as seen in the alarming suicidal ideation rate among rural African American men, where silence meets scarcity. People don't wear masks because they're deceptive. They wear masks because they're afraid of judgment from those they love the most, afraid of rejection, afraid of being a burden, afraid of being seen as weak in a world that equates strength with silence, afraid of being told you're fine when they're drowning. I know what that feels like. I know how it feels when you're weighed down and the waves start crashing over your head, When you reach out and you're told that everything is going to be okay, it is gut-wrenching. And when someone loses themselves to silence, they don't just lose their voice, they lose their connection to the people who love them. Human beings need connection. It's oxygen for the soul. Starved of connection, your mind deteriorates. This is why community is so important. Your community doesn't need to be big. It can be one friend who listens without fixing, one cousin who shares the load, one coworker who notices the shadows, one neighbor who knocks on your door with coffee, one person who knows the real you, unmasked. And if you don't have that person right now, you can borrow one until you do. You can borrow me. I am always available for anyone who needs someone to listen. No agenda, just presence. You can find me on Instagram at wistfulwounds.jem. If you don't have a community, I will gladly be that community for you, because what breaks in isolation is healed in community. And some people need time before they can trust others, and that's okay. That trust rebuilds slowly, like dawn after night. In the meantime, there are tools, gentle, accessible ones, aligned with shadow work practices like journaling for boundary setting and emotional release. You can start journaling prompts. Writing helps release stored emotion and uncover patterns without overwhelm, and no one will ever see what you wrote unless you show it to them. You can try meditation, which teaches awareness and emotional clarity, rewiring nervous systems over time. There are guided apps like Headspace. Headspace offers daily meditations and check-ins. I love Headspace. I've been using it for years, and they didn't pay me to say that. I should really try it. Or you could try therapy. There are anonymous hotlines like 988. These practices saved me, pulled me from my own edges. Meditation changed my entire nervous system, turning chaos to calm. Journaling helped me hear my voice again. It was faint at first, but then it was strong. Healing is possible, even if you start alone in the quiet of your room. There are also culturally tailored options like identity affirming therapy that address discrimination's unique impact. Let's make this real right now. Here's how we begin dismantling stigma, not in theory, but in action today. When you leave today, text one person, just one, and say, hey, what's up? Simple, real. You have no idea what kind of day they're having, what spiral you could be interrupting. You could prevent a bad decision or a night of despair. You could remind someone that they matter, and everyone just wants to feel like they matter. And that is how change begins. One seed planted, one person, one text, one conversation, and one crack in the wall of stigma, widening with each echo. Multiply that by every person sitting in this room, and suddenly the silence begins to break. We cannot heal what we refuse to name, but if we name it together, it no longer owns us. If anything I said resonated with you, please continue this conversation with me. Message me on Instagram for my eyes only, promise. I would love to hear your story, your silences, and your breakthroughs. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for choosing awareness over silence. I'm Jem.